Ji-1 Kim sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small metal badge in her palm. Tomorrow it would either become her official fleet officer badge or a painful reminder of failure. 4 years of training had led to this moment. "You should sleep," said a voice from across the room. Ji-1 looked up at her roommate. Tahoe Park's blue skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of their academy quarters. Though he looked alien with his 4 eyes and ridged forehead, his mannerisms were very human. Raised by Korean parents on Earth after a diplomatic mission, he had chosen a human name and human ways. "I can't sleep," Ji-1 said. "Not before the Void trial." Tahoe sighed. "The other species don't worry about the trial. For them, graduation is just a ceremony. They're not human," Ji-1 said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "They don't have to prove themselves like we do." She stood up and walked to the window. The Galactic Fleet Academy hung in space, a giant ring-shaped station orbiting an empty moon. Stars filled the darkness beyond the thick glass. Somewhere out there was Earth, so far away now. "No human has scored in the top rank for 50 years, Tahoe said. He meant to be helpful, but his words stung. "I know the statistics," Ji-1 said. "Everyone knows. The Council thinks humans are too weak, too emotional, too fragile." Tahoe joined her at the window. "Is it true that on Earth they call these stories HFY?" Ji-1 smiled a little. "Humanity. F******, yeah. Old stories about humans showing aliens that we're not as weak as they think. I've read some. They're good stories. But that's all they are to the Council. Stories." Ji-1 pressed her hand against the cold window. "The aliens think we're just good for creative thinking and art. Not leadership. Not real space work." The academy lights dimmed further, signaling night cycle. Most cadets would be asleep now, resting before tomorrow's graduation. But Ji-1 knew she wasn't the only human still awake. All 12 human cadets in her class would be feeling the same pressure. "What do you think they'll give you for the trial?" Tahoe asked. "Something hard. Something designed to make humans fail." Ji-1 turned from the window. Admiral Lee said to be ready for anything. Ji-1 pulled out her tablet and opened her notes one more time. She had studied every past Void trial scenario, every possible emergency, every ship system and protocol. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she kept reading. "Ji-1," Tahoe said gently, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, "your problem isn't knowledge. You know more than any cadet in our class." "Then what is my problem?" she asked. "You care too much what they think." Tahoe pointed toward the administrative tower where the council members were staying. "The aliens, the commanders, all of them." Ji-1 closed her tablet. "I have to care. I'm not just taking this test for me." Tahoe nodded, understanding. "For all humans. For my parents who never got the chance to see space. For every human who was told to stay on Earth because we're too fragile for deep space." Ji-1 placed her badge on the small desk. "We've been part of the Galactic Alliance for 300 years, but they still treat us like children." The room fell silent. Finally, Tahoe spoke. "What will you do if they make it impossible?" Ji-1 lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling. "Nothing is impossible," she said. "That's the one thing humans know that aliens don't seem to understand." Her eyes felt heavy at last. As sleep began to take her, Ji-1 thought of Admiral Lee's words from earlier that day. "They don't expect you to succeed, Cadet Kim. Use that. When people don't expect you to rise, they'd never look down." Tomorrow, she would show them all what humans could do. Admiral Hyunjin Lee stood tall on the observation deck, his hands clasped behind his back. Through the large window, he watched the final year cadets gather in the main hall below. His eyes found Ji-1 easily among them. Even from this distance, he could see how straight she stood, trying to look confident. 57 cadets, said a cold voice behind him. "Only 12 humans this year." Admiral Lee turned. Commander Sun Woo Choi walked onto the deck, followed by 3 other council members. Though Choi looked human in his fleet uniform, his gray skin and tall, thin body showed his alien nature. As a Vexari, he was known for his logical mind and little patience for what he called human weakness. "Good morning, Commander," Admiral Lee said. "The cadets are ready for their trials." Commander Choi looked down at the waiting students. "Are they? I wonder about the humans." A tall, insect-like council member named Kirax clicked her mandibles. "Humans have always been a special case in our alliance." Special. Choi's mouth formed what might have been a smile. An interesting word for fragile. Admiral Lee kept his face calm, though he felt anger rising. "Humans have proven their worth many times, Commander." "In small ways, perhaps," Choi said. "Creative thinking, art, music, but real space command. The void is no place for creatures so easily broken." The observation deck fell silent. The other council members seemed uncomfortable, but said nothing. Everyone knew Commander Choi had blocked human advancement in the fleet for years. "What about Cadet Kim?" Admiral Lee asked. "She has the highest marks in her class." Commander Choi walked to the window and looked down at Jaewon. "Ah yes, your star human." He tapped the glass. "Test scores are one thing, Admiral. Real space is another." "Give her a fair trial," Admiral Lee said. "That's all I ask." Commander Choi turned, his eyes narrow. "Fair. Is the void fair, Admiral? Is space fair when it freezes your blood or burns your skin? Are enemy ships fair when they fire on you?" The other council members nodded. Even Admiral Lee could not argue with this. "If humans want equality," Choi continued, "they must prove they can handle the worst the void has to offer." He walked to the control panel and pressed his hand against the screen. The trial assignments appeared, each cadet's name next to their scenario. He scrolled to Jaewon's name. "A standard rescue mission." Commander Choi shook his head. "No, too easy." With a few taps, he changed the parameters of Jaewon's trial. Admiral Lee looked over his shoulder and felt his stomach tighten. "Commander, those conditions are extreme. No cadet has ever faced that combination of challenges." "Then she will be the first." Commander Choi's voice was final. "If humans truly belong among the stars, let her prove it." The insect council member clicked nervously. "Perhaps we should be careful. The neural interfaces can cause real pain if the scenario is too intense." "She can end the trial at any time," Commander Choi said. "All she needs to do is admit defeat." Admiral Lee knew what that meant. No human would ever admit defeat in front of the council. They would rather suffer. "Your species has always claimed the human weakness. Your emotions, your fragile bodies, are actually strengths." Commander Choi said to Admiral Lee, "Today we will see if that's true or just another human story." Below them, the cadets were entering their simulation chambers. Ji-won walked with her head high, unaware of what waited for her. Admiral Lee watched her disappear into her chamber. "She will surprise you," he said quietly. Commander Choi made a sound that might have been a laugh. "That would be a first, Admiral. In all my years, humans have never surprised me." The lights on the observation deck dimmed as the trials began. On the main screen, 27 different scenarios played out at once. Admiral Lee's eyes stayed fixed on Jaewon's screen. "Now," Commander Choi said, "let us see what your human can do." Jaewon entered the simulation chamber with steady steps. The room was large and empty except for a single chair in the center. White walls surrounded her, blank and waiting. She knew they would soon vanish, replaced by whatever test the council had chosen for her. She sat in the chair and placed her hands on the armrests. Small metal circles rose to meet her fingertips. The neural interface. Jaewon took a deep breath. Once connected, her mind would believe everything it saw and felt. Pain would feel real. Fear would feel real. Death would feel real, even though her body would remain safe in the chair. A technician's voice came through a speaker. "Ready, Cadet Kim." "Ready, Jai-1 said. The circles touched her skin, cold at first, then warm. The white walls faded. Ji-1 blinked, and suddenly she was no longer in the chamber. She sat in the captain's chair of a small scout ship. Stars shone through the front window. Control panels glowed around her. Jai-1 checked the ship's computer. Her mission appeared on the screen. Navigate through an asteroid field. Reach the mining colony on the other side. Deliver medical supplies for a disease outbreak. Simple enough. Then she noticed the warning lights. Engine power at 40%. Shields damaged. Oxygen system running on backup. This was not how a mission should start. Computer, ship status, Jai-1 said. The computer's voice was calm. Scout ship horizon damaged by micrometeor shower. Multiple systems compromised. Jai-1 frowned. Most trials started with a working ship. Problems happened during the mission, not before it even began. She pulled up the navigation screen. The asteroid field ahead was not normal either. Rocks floated too close together, moving in strange patterns. It would be nearly impossible to fly through even with a perfect ship. Computer, scan for safe route through asteroid field. Unable to comply. Long-range scanners offline. Jai-1 clenched her jaw. Of course they are. She began checking each system, looking for ways to repair or work around the damage. As she worked, a new alarm sounded. Warning. Unknown vessels detected. 3 red dots appeared on the radar, moving toward her position. Enemy ships. Ji-1's heart beat faster. Computer, identify vessels. Unable to comply. Database corrupted. Jai-1 shook her head. Is anything working on this ship? She tried to send a distress signal, but communications were down too. The ship drifted closer to the asteroid field. The enemy ships were closing in from behind. She was trapped. In the observation deck above the simulation chambers, Commander Choi watched Jai-1's scenario with cold eyes. Fascinating, he said. She hasn't called for termination yet. Admiral Lee stood beside him, face tight with worry. Most cadets would have ended the trial by now. On the screen, they could see Jai-1 working frantically, trying every possible solution. Her vital signs showed elevated heart rate and stress, but she kept working. The asteroid field is impossible to navigate, Commander Choi said. The enemies will catch her if she stays here. The colony is too far to reach with her damaged engines. There is no solution. There's always a solution, Admiral Lee said quietly. Commander Choi laughed. That's very human of you, Admiral. Sometimes the correct answer is to accept defeat. Back in the simulation, Jai-1 stared at her controls. Every path seemed blocked. The medical supplies in her cargo hold were needed urgently. People would die if she failed. But how could she succeed when nothing worked properly? She closed her eyes for a moment. Think, she whispered to herself. There has to be a way. The enemy ships were now close enough to see through her view screen. Large and threatening, their weapons systems powered up. The nearest asteroid loomed ahead, massive and spinning slowly. Most cadets would call for help now. Most would admit the test was too hard. Jai-1 gripped the controls tighter. Computer, divert all remaining power to engines and front shields. Warning, this will disable life support systems. Do it anyway. As the ship surged forward, Jai-1 smiled grimly. If the Council wanted to see what humans could do when pushed to their limits, she would show them. She aimed directly at the largest asteroid ahead. 3 hours had passed in the simulation. Ji-1's ship was barely holding together. Warning lights flashed across every panel. The air felt thin as the oxygen slowly depleted. Oxygen levels at 18%, the computer announced. Estimated time to critical levels, 42 minutes. Jai-1 wiped sweat from her forehead. Her left arm throbbed with pain from a simulated injury she had received when the ship hit a small asteroid. The neural interface made the pain feel completely real. She had lost contact with her virtual crew an hour ago when a power surge damaged the internal communication system. She was alone on the bridge, fighting to keep the ship moving. In the observation deck, Commander Choi leaned forward, watching Jai-1's vital signs on a side screen. Her heart rate was dangerously high. Her stress levels exceeded normal parameters. She should have terminated the trial 2 hours ago, he said. This is becoming dangerous for her. Admiral Lee didn't take his eyes off the main screen. She's still functioning, still thinking. For what purpose? Commander Choi asked. She cannot complete the mission. The ship is too damaged. The colony is still too far away. On the screen, they could see Jai-1 struggling to reroute power to the engines. Her movements were becoming slower as the oxygen levels dropped. The neural interface was perfectly simulating the effects of oxygen deprivation. She will call for termination soon, Commander Choi said with certainty. The human body cannot handle much more stress. As if to prove his point, another alarm sounded on Jai-1's ship. A fuel line had ruptured. Fire broke out in the engine room. Fire suppression systems offline, the computer reported calmly. Jai-1 hit her console in frustration. Then she became very still, staring at the largest asteroid directly ahead of her. Her ship was drifting toward it, pulled by its gravity. Most pilots would try to fight the pull, to steer away from the danger. Instead, Jai-1 did something that made Commander Choi stand up in surprise. She turned off the engines completely and aimed directly toward the asteroid. "What is she doing?" one of the council members asked. Admiral Lee smiled slightly. "Watch." Inside the simulation, Jai-1 felt the ship accelerating as the asteroid's gravity pulled her closer. The huge rock filled her view screen now. She watched its slow rotation carefully, calculating in her head. "Computer, how long until impact with the asteroid?" 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Jai-1 nodded. "Prepare to fire reverse thrusters on my mark. Use all remaining fuel." The fire alarms continued to blare. The oxygen level dropped to 15%. Her vision began to blur around the edges. But Jai-1 kept her focus on the asteroid, watching its movement. The enemy ships behind her had slowed their approach. They were confused by her actions, unsure what she was planning. 2 minutes to impact, the computer said. In the observation room, the council members had fallen silent. Even Commander Choi seemed transfixed by Ji-1's strange strategy. "She plans to use the asteroid's gravity," Admiral Lee explained. "A slingshot maneuver." Commander Choi shook his head. "Impossible. The timing would need to be perfect. And even if she succeeds, her ship is too damaged to survive." On the view screen, Jai-1's face was pale from lack of oxygen, but her eyes remained sharp and focused. She watched the asteroid growing larger and larger in front of her. 1 minute to impact, the computer announced. Jai-1's fingers hovered over the thruster controls. Her timing would need to be perfect. Too early or too late, and she would crash into the asteroid's surface. The ship shuddered violently. Another system failed. The lights on the bridge flickered and went out, leaving only the red emergency lights. 30 seconds to impact. Jai-1 felt her consciousness fading. The lack of oxygen was affecting her brain now, but she forced herself to stay awake, to keep watching the asteroid's rotation. 15 seconds to impact. Commander Choi stood up. "She's going to crash. End the simulation." "Wait," Admiral Lee said. "Give her a chance." On the screen, Jai-1's ship hurtled toward certain destruction. The asteroid's cratered surface filled the entire view screen now. 5 seconds to impact. Jai-1's hand moved to the thruster controls. "Now," she whispered. The reverse thrusters fired with a deafening roar. Ji-1's body slammed back into her chair as the ship fought against the asteroid's pull. Warning lights flashed as the engines strained beyond their limits. For a terrible moment, the ship seemed frozen in space, neither moving away from nor toward the asteroid. Then slowly, it began to curve around the massive rock. Jai-1 felt the G-forces crushing her as the ship accelerated along the asteroid's gravitational field. Her vision darkened. She fought to stay conscious, knowing that if she passed out now, the ship would be torn apart. In the observation room, the council members watched in stunned silence. "Impossible," whispered Commander Choi. "The ship should have broken apart under that stress." Admiral Lee smiled. She calculated the perfect approach angle. The ship is accelerating using the asteroid's gravity instead of its own damaged engines. On the screen, Jae-won's ship completed its arc around the asteroid. It shot away from the rock at nearly triple its previous speed, hurtling toward open space. The enemy ships, still waiting on the other side of the asteroid field, had lost track of her. Inside the simulation, Jae-won's hands flew over the controls. The slingshot maneuver had worked, but the ship had taken more damage. The hull was breached in 2 places. Emergency shields were the only thing keeping her alive. "Computer, shut down all systems except life support and emergency shields," Jae-won ordered. "Warning: all navigation, weapons, and communication systems will be offline," the computer responded. "Do it now," Jae-won said. One by one, the lights on the bridge went dark. The hum of the engines died away. Soon, the only sound was Jae-won's breathing in the dimly lit bridge. "What is she doing now?" asked one of the council members. Admiral Lee studied the screen. "An old Earth naval strategy," he explained. "When outgunned and outnumbered, sometimes ships would play dead." "Play dead." Commander Choi repeated the phrase as if it made no sense. "Yes, by shutting down all systems, her ship will appear as debris to enemy sensors. They won't pursue what they think is a destroyed vessel." Commander Choi frowned. "That leaves her completely defenseless." "Yes," Admiral Lee agreed. "It requires accepting total vulnerability to gain an advantage. Many alien species would find this strategy too frightening to consider." Inside the darkened ship, Jae-won floated in her chair. With the artificial gravity offline, she had secured herself with safety straps. Her breath formed small clouds in the freezing air. The emergency heat was minimal, just enough to keep her from freezing to death. Through the view screen, she watched as one of the enemy ships passed nearby, scanning the asteroid field for her. Its powerful lights swept through the darkness, passing over her ship without pausing. To their sensors, she was just another piece of space debris. Jae-won waited until all 3 enemy ships had moved away, searching in the wrong direction. Then she began the careful process of bringing her systems back online, one by one. First, life support, restoring heat and proper oxygen levels. Then minimal power to the engines. Navigation came next, allowing her to plot a new course to the colony. "She's bypassing the main computer," Admiral Lee pointed out. "We're routing control systems manually to avoid triggering alarms or energy signatures the enemy might detect." Commander Choi leaned closer to the screen. For the first time, there was a hint of interest in his cold eyes. "This approach is unconventional," he admitted reluctantly. Jae-won's ship began to move slowly through the asteroid field, using the minimum power needed. She navigated by sight, carefully guiding the damaged vessel between floating rocks, staying in their shadows to avoid detection. Admiral Lee turned to Commander Choi. "Humans have always been good at making the best of bad situations. When our technology fails us, we adapt." On the screen, Jae-won had managed to restore communications enough to send a short burst transmission to the colony, warning them of the enemy ships and requesting landing coordinates. Her message was brief, using minimal power to avoid detection. The colony responded immediately. Landing Bay 4 prepared. Medical team standing by. For the first time in hours, Jae-won allowed herself a small smile. She had a chance now. A slim one, but it was more than she had before. The ship limped forward, damaged but still moving. Ji-won looked at the oxygen meter minus 30 minutes left. The colony was 25 minutes away at her current speed. It would be close. Very close. But possible. Ji-won was halfway to the colony when a new alarm sounded. She checked her screens and felt her heart sink. The ship's long-range sensors had detected a solar flare erupting from the nearby star. "Computer, Time until solar radiation reaches our position. 8 minutes, 14 seconds, the computer replied. Warning. Ship shields cannot withstand radiation at projected levels. Jai-1 hit the communication panel. Colony base. This is Scout Ship Horizon. Incoming solar flare detected. Request emergency guidance. Static filled the speakers. The solar activity was already disrupting communications. In the observation room, Commander Choi smiled coldly. Now we see the end. The simulation has introduced a solar flare. Her ship cannot survive it, and she is too far from the colony to reach safety in time. Admiral Lee's face showed concern. This is extreme, Commander. Solar flares weren't part of the original parameters. The void is unpredictable, Commander Choi replied. If humans wish to command ships in deep space, they must face all its dangers. On the screen, Jai-1 was checking the ship's systems, looking for a solution. The colony was still 12 minutes away at her current speed. The solar flare would hit in 8 minutes. The math was simple and brutal. She couldn't outrun it. She will call for termination now, Commander Choi said confidently. Instead, Jai-1 rose from her captain's chair and moved to a locker on the wall. She pulled out a spacesuit and began putting it on. Commander Choi frowned. What is she doing? Admiral Lee watched closely. I believe she's preparing for EVA. Extravehicular activity. In the middle of a crisis, the Insect Council member clicked her mandibles nervously. That's madness. Jai-1 finished sealing her helmet and moved to the airlock. She gathered tools and repair materials, strapping them to her suit. Computer, can the communication array be adjusted to create a radiation shield? Affirmative, the computer responded. However, manual adjustment is required. External access necessary. Jai-1 entered the airlock. Begin decompression sequence. In the observation room, all the alien council members stood up in shock. She's going outside the ship. Commander Choi could not hide his disbelief. In the path of a solar flare. Stop the simulation, the insect member demanded. This is too dangerous, even for a neural interface experience. Admiral Lee held up his hand. She knows what she's doing. Let her continue. The outer airlock door opened, and Jai-1 stepped into the void. Only a thin tether connected her to the ship. She pushed off carefully, using small bursts from her suit thrusters to move toward the communication array on top of the vessel. The stars surrounded her in cold, silent beauty. For a moment, Jai-1 allowed herself to feel the wonder of floating in space. Then she focused on her task. The communications array was a complex tangle of dishes and antennas. Jai-1 examined it quickly, then began to work. Her gloved hands moved with practiced precision, disconnecting cables and reattaching them in new configurations. 6 minutes until solar flare impact, the computer's voice said in her helmet. Jai-1 worked faster. She rotated the main satellite dish and angled it to face the approaching flare. Then she connected it to the ship's main power, bypassing safety protocols. In the observation room, Admiral Lee explained, she's converting the communication array into a makeshift radiation shield. If she can angle it correctly, it will deflect enough radiation to protect the ship's vital systems. The math involved in such calculations, Commander Choi began, is being done in her head. Admiral Lee finished. Humans train for this. Jai-1 was now rewiring the control panel outside the ship. Sweat dripped into her eyes inside her helmet. The suit's oxygen indicator showed 15 minutes remaining, enough to finish the job, but with little margin for error. 4 minutes until solar flare impact, the computer warned. The aliens watching the simulation fell silent. None of their species would ever willingly expose themselves to the void like this. The emptiness of space triggered deep, instinctive fears in most intelligent species. Yet here was this human, floating in nothingness, working as calmly as if she were in a repair bay. 3 minutes until solar flare impact. Jai-1 connected the final wire. The communication array hummed with power, its dish glowing as it powered up to create an electromagnetic field. Now she just needed to get back inside before the flare hit. Jai-1 pushed off from the communication array, using her suit thrusters to move back toward the airlock. The modified dish was now humming with power, ready to shield the ship from the solar flare. 2 minutes until solar flare impact, the computer's voice warned in her helmet. She reached the airlock and pulled herself inside. The doors sealed behind her with a hiss. As the chamber began to pressurize, Jai-1 allowed herself a moment of relief. Then a new message came through her helmet comm. "Emergency distress signal detected," the computer announced. "Alliance transport ship Gambit, carrying 36 passengers. Critical engine failure. Life support failing." Jai-1 froze. Location. A map appeared on her helmet display. The damaged transport was nearby, but in the opposite direction from the colony. If she diverted to help them, she would miss her delivery deadline. She would fail her mission. In the observation room, Commander Choi leaned forward with interest. "Ah, a moral dilemma," he said. "Complete her assigned mission or attempt a rescue." Admiral Lee watched Jai-1's vital signs. Her heart rate had spiked, but was now steadying as she made her decision. "For humans, this is hardly a dilemma," he said quietly. Inside the airlock, Jai-1 removed her helmet as soon as pressure normalized. She rushed to the bridge and took control of the ship. "Computer, plot new course to intercept Transport Gambit. Warning: diverting to Transport Gambit will ensure mission failure. Medical supplies will not reach colony base within required timeframe." "I understand," Jai-1 said firmly. "Plot the course." The ship's engines fired up, turning away from the colony and toward the distressed transport. The modified communication array was working, creating a shield against the approaching solar radiation. Commander Choi shook his head. Emotional decision-making. This is why humans are problematic in command positions. "Is it emotional to save 36 lives?" Admiral Lee asked. "It is emotional to abandon a mission objective based on a subjective value judgment," Commander Choi replied. "The colony needs those medical supplies. People may die without them. So she must choose who lives and who dies," Admiral Lee said. "That is the test you've given her." Commander Choi's expression was cold. Command requires such choices. On the view screen, Jai-1's ship approached the damaged transport. It was larger than her scout ship, its engines dark and lifeless. Jai-1 opened a communication channel. "Transport Gambit, this is Scout Ship Horizon, responding to your distress call." A weak reply came through, filled with static. "Horizon, this is Captain Da-hyun of Transport Gambit. We've lost main power. Life support failing. Multiple injured passengers. I'm preparing to dock and evacuate your people," Jai-1 said. She maneuvered her damaged ship alongside the transport. It wasn't designed to carry so many passengers, but there was no choice. The solar flare would hit soon, and while her modified shield might protect one ship, it couldn't protect both. Jai-1 extended the docking tube between the vessels. As she worked, Admiral Lee explained her actions to the Council. "She's going to evacuate the transport's passengers to her ship, then continue to the colony. Her ship cannot carry that many people," Commander Choi pointed out. "And even if it could, she would still miss her deadline." "Yes," Admiral Lee agreed. "By any standard measure, she will fail this trial." "Then why continue?" asked the Insect Council member. Admiral Lee smiled slightly. "Because humans measure success differently." As the docking tube sealed in place, J1 received another message from the colony. "Scout Ship Horizon, where are you? The medical supplies are urgently needed. Patients are deteriorating." J1 closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of her decision. Then she opened a channel to reply. "Colony Base, this is Horizon. I've diverted to assist Transport Gambit. 36 lives at immediate risk. Will deliver medical supplies as soon as possible." There was a long pause before the colony responded. "Understood, Horizon. Please hurry." In the observation room, Commander Choi's expression had changed. He was watching Jai-1 with new intensity. "She knows she's failing the mission parameters," he said, yet she continues without hesitation. "Yes," Admiral Lee said simply. "That's what humans do." As Jai-1 prepared to board the transport to help with evacuation, the ship's sensors detected something new. The solar flare had changed direction. It was now heading directly toward both ships, and it would arrive in less than 60 seconds. "Solar flare impact in 50 seconds, the computer announced. Jai-1's mind raced. Her modified shield might protect one ship, but not both. The transport ship had 36 people. Her scout ship carried vital medicine for hundreds of the colony. "Captain Da-hyun, we have a problem," Jai-1 said into the comm. "Solar flare approaching. My shield can't protect both ships." "Understood," the transport captain replied. His voice was steady despite the danger. "Save your ship and the medical supplies. We knew the risks when we joined the fleet." Jai-1 shook her head, though she knew he couldn't see her. "That's not how this works, Captain." In the observation room, Commander Choi watched with growing interest. "Now we see the final test," he said. "She must choose. Save herself and her mission, or sacrifice everything for strangers." Admiral Lee remained silent, his eyes fixed on Jae-1. On the screen, Jae-1 was moving fast. She ran back to the airlock and grabbed her spacesuit. "What is she doing now?" the Insect Council member asked. No one answered. They all watched as Jai-1 put her helmet back on and sealed her suit. "Computer, vent atmosphere from the bridge," Jai-1 ordered. "Divert all life support power to shields." "Warning, this action will make the bridge uninhabitable," the computer responded. "I won't be on the bridge," Jai-1 said. "Execute command." The observation room was completely silent now. Even Commander Choi seemed stunned by what they were witnessing. Jai-1 moved to the engine room. She opened a panel and began rewiring the reactor controls. "Solar flare impact in 30 seconds, the computer warned. Jai-1 worked with incredible speed. She disconnected her suit's propulsion system and attached it to the ship's reactor. It was a makeshift pressure valve, a dangerous modification that could either save everyone or kill them all instantly. "What is she attempting?" Commander Choi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Lee leaned forward, studying the screen. "She's creating a directional energy burst. If she can time it perfectly with the solar flare's arrival." "That's insanely dangerous," another council member said. "Yes," Admiral Lee agreed, "and exactly what I would expect from her." Jai-1 finished her work and moved to the external airlock. She was going outside again, directly into the path of the solar flare. Her hands moved over the controls, programming a precise sequence. Solar flare impact in 15 seconds. In the vacuum of space between the two ships, Jai-1 positioned herself next to her makeshift device. The modified reactor control was wired to her suit's control panel. From here, she could direct the energy burst at exactly the right moment. 10 seconds to impact. Jai-1 looked up. Through her helmet, she could see the star flaring in the distance, a wave of deadly radiation rushing toward them. 5 seconds. She pressed the final button. Her suit's propulsion system fired, channeling power directly into the ship's reactor. The energy built to dangerous levels. 3, 2, 1. The solar flare hit just as Jae-1's device reached maximum power. A brilliant flash of energy erupted from her ship's reactor, creating a shockwave that spread outward like a bubble. It met the solar radiation head-on, creating a spectacular collision of forces. Inside her suit, Jae-1's sensors went haywire. The radiation levels spiked dangerously. Pain shot through her body as the neural interface translated the radiation exposure into physical sensation. But she held her position, keeping the energy flow steady. In the observation room, alarms were blaring. Jae-1's vital signs were reaching critical levels. "Terminate the simulation," Admiral Lee shouted. "She's taking too much damage." Commander Choi's hand hovered over the termination button, but he didn't press it. Instead, he watched with an unreadable expression as Jai-1 fought against impossible odds. The energy bubble expanded, pushing back against the solar flare. The transport ship was now completely within its protection. J-1's scout ship was partially shielded as well, the modified communication array working alongside her improvised energy field. For a terrible moment, it seemed like the radiation would break through. J-1 diverted all remaining power from her suit to the device, including her own life support. Warnings flashed across her helmet display. Oxygen levels critical. Suit power failing. But the energy field held. The solar flare passed, its deadly radiation deflected away from both ships. In the sudden silence that followed, Jai-1 floated motionless between the vessels, her suit dark and powerless. Is she? The Insect Council member couldn't finish the question. On the screen, Jai-1's vital signs showed a faint, irregular heartbeat. She was alive. Barely. Jai-1 opened her eyes slowly. Bright lights made her blink. She was lying on a bed in what looked like the Academy's medical bay. The neural interface was gone. The simulation was over. She tried to sit up but felt dizzy. Her body remembered the pain from the simulation, even though it hadn't been real. "Easy," a familiar voice said. The neural feedback was intense. "Your body needs time to adjust." Admiral Lee stood beside her bed. Behind him, J-1 was surprised to see Commander Choi waiting silently. "Did I fail?" J-1 asked. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been screaming. Admiral Lee smiled. "Quite the opposite, Cadet Kim." Commander Choi stepped forward. His face was as stern as ever, but something had changed in his eyes. "You abandoned your primary mission objective," he said. "You risked ship and cargo on an uncertain rescue attempt. You exposed yourself to the void not once, but twice. You improvised dangerous modifications to ship systems." Jai-1 looked down, expecting the worst. "And in doing so," Commander Choi continued, "you achieved the highest score on the void trial in 20 years. Jai-1's head snapped up. "What?" Admiral Lee handed her a small screen showing her results. "You found solutions where there seemed to be none. You refused to accept no-win scenarios." "But I didn't deliver the medical supplies in time," Jai-1 said. "I failed the mission." "The mission parameters were impossible by design," Commander Choi admitted. "No cadet has ever been given such difficult conditions. We wanted to see how you would handle failure." "Instead," Admiral Lee added, "you showed us something far more valuable than mission completion. You showed us human adaptability and courage." Jai-1 sat up straighter, her dizziness fading. "Then the graduation ceremony is in 1 hour," Admiral Lee said. "You should be there to receive your commission, Lieutenant Kim." "Lieutenant, not cadet anymore." Ji-1 felt a rush of pride. Commander Choi handed her a small data chip. "Your trial has been recorded for future training purposes. All cadets, regardless of species, will learn from your performance today." "I don't understand," Jai-1 said. "You've always said humans were too fragile for Deep Space Command." Commander Choi was quiet for a moment. "I have served in the fleet for 97 years. In that time, I have seen many species face the void. None approach it quite like humans do." He gestured to the data chip. "Other species rely on strength or technology or natural abilities. Humans rely on something else, a willingness to risk everything, to face the impossible, to keep fighting when logic says to surrender." "We call it hope," Jai-1 said simply. "Whatever you call it," Commander Choi replied. "The Alliance needs it." 1 hour later, Jai-1 stood with her fellow cadets in the Great Hall. She saw her roommate Taiho in the crowd, grinning with all 4 eyes. When her name was called, she walked to the center of the stage. Admiral Lee placed the officer's badge on her uniform. It gleamed under the lights, no longer just a piece of metal, but a symbol of everything she had fought for. Commander Choi stepped forward to address the gathered cadets and council members. Today, we welcome new officers to the fleet. Among them is Lieutenant Jae-won Kim, whose void trial will set a new standard for all cadets. He turned to face Jae-won directly. For 300 years, the Alliance has debated whether humans truly belong among the stars. Today, that debate ends. A murmur ran through the crowd. The other human cadets looked at each other in disbelief. Lieutenant Kim's trial has been reviewed by the full council, Commander Choi continued. As a result, all restrictions on human advancement within the fleet have been removed. From this day forward, humans will be eligible for all positions, including Deep Space Command. Jae-won stood tall, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just her victory. It was for all humans who had been told they were too fragile, too emotional, too human for the void. Admiral Lee leaned close and whispered, "You didn't just pass a test today, Lieutenant. You changed the future." As Jae-won looked out at the stars through the Great Hall's windows, she knew that her graduation hadn't been a ceremony after all. It had been something far more important, a trial by void that proved humanity's place among the stars.